tātou te whanu, koutou ngā pau, ngā rahi o te taone, o kukuia, o kukou mātua, me taku tuakana I roti te whanu nei tēnei o ka mehi atu kia koutou. So I've come with the residents of number 141, 143 and 145 Cockburn Street. And they specifically came together to address the issues that the three of them have faced. And so we're going to, each of them is about 5 minutes of a kōrero. Tracy Robins, who is behind you on screen, is going to connect, she's in Rotorua at the minute. And so they can introduce themselves as they speak, but basically these are the residents from 141, 143, 145 Cockburn. I came to be involved when cousin Tracy, about 2 years ago, just after she bought her house, came to see me about the sewage issues. What could we do? So we started then, that's how I got involved, and then we found out it's been going on forever, and so these guys are going to let you know. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou, kōweo, who am I? I'm the 8th great-grandchild of the prominent chief Reti Mana Te Pōrau who gifted the land that the township of Masterton was built on. I am Jasmine Robins. Through just these 8 generations of my whānau, we have given a minimum of 100 years in support of the growth of our community. My grandmother alone has given 50 plus years of her life to the primary school sector, to sports and to many charitable causes. And she's still giving at 86 years old. I have had the privilege of teaching our next generation in the early childhood sector for the past 8 years. Never in a million years did I think that in the 2000s in New Zealand I would be living in third world conditions. Now you might think that that is a big statement to make, but once you hear a snippet of our stories you'll realise that it is indeed a factual statement. This has been a 2-year battle for me. 2 years of constant email correspondence between myself, my neighbours, the then Mayor, the CE and the Head of Infrastructure. 2 years of having my whare tapawhā broken down. My physical health, my mental health, my spiritual health and my family health. 2 years too long. If the council upheld its own Health Act, I wouldn't be standing here today. Your Health Act 1956 states it is the duty of the council to improve, promote and protect public health within its district. For 10 years, the council has somewhat ignored the fact that their poor infrastructure has directly affected the health and well-being of whānau within their district. Why has it taken 10 years and a solution from my neighbour for the council to finally start talking about an acceptable resolution to this issue? I am now going to share a glimpse into my life over the past 2 years. Myself and my child have had to walk through sewage water for 2 days before the council decided they had time to relocate my portaloo. I have had to use a portaloo in winter weather while having COVID. I then had to have an extra 3 days off work unpaid after my COVID turned into a chest infection that I have no doubt was a direct result of using a portaloo in the wet and the cold. Every time there is heavy rain downpour, I lose all my amenities. I'm unable to use my toilet, wash my clothing, wash my dishes, and more concerning, I'm unable to shower. Please explain to me why water is added into my rates when it is something that isn't always available to me. The amount of time I've spent writing emails, on the phone to the council, ringing after hours and repeating my circumstances over and over and over again could be counted as a part-time job. Now I am already a single, full-time working mother who volunteers and seeks professional development with a sports-mad child who is always busy. This is unnecessary pressure the council puts on me on a regular basis. I've had to wait 3 to 4 weeks for someone to come in, disinfect my shed after it was flooded and contaminated with sewage water. There was no offer or willingness to do this. I had to chase it up and then do half the work myself, such as clear it all out and water blast first, as directed by the council's cleaner, the cleaner they sent. I also had to spend some of my food money on disinfectant after first being told you didn't clean the inside, and that was including the shed. Once again, putting my health in jeopardy. More recently, I gave the council 48 hours notice of a weather warning, which is not my job, and asked for a portaloo to be dropped off knowing we were more than likely going to flood. It never arrived. Instead, 2 hours after my toilet stopped working, it showed up as a result of me reaching out once more. The shed I have mentioned previously that flooded was, and I repeat was, my son's place of hauora. His gym, his physical health. His place to have some downtime, his mental and spiritual health. And the place he enjoyed sharing with whānau, his family health. This, of course, is no longer the case, thanks to the council. Enough is enough. The council's time of getting away with diminishing mine and my son's health has come to an end. No longer will we accept excuses and action that is below what we deserve. I would like to encourage you all to research the definition and meaning of manaakitanga, because that is something I have neither felt nor seen in my dealings with the council over the past 2 years. To sum up my experience over the last 2 years would be to say I am physically, emotionally and financially done. Uphold your legal responsibilities and I'll continue to uphold mine. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jasmine.
10 years is a long time to be using a temporary solution. The only reason we are moving forward is because we came up with a permanent solution that will impact us on a positive way. Although the damage is done, though the inaction of council staff, water team, engineers, infrastructure team to fix this problem. My husband became a plumber to learn about this stuff and understand it. He came up with the solution, so how come no council staff mentioned above suggested a pump chamber that were designed for exactly these situations? They've been around for longer than 10 years. My kids have suffered a lot, missed out on a lot. Our lives have been at a standstill for years. We've endured what we shouldn't have had to, which council has allowed simply by doing nothing. Fobbing us off, always referring to the long-term plan, which ironically Cockburn Street isn't even mentioned, we've come to learn. We pay rates to be your sewage pond. That's exactly why this issue wasn't fixed, because you knew where the water waste was going, venting on our properties, which was relieving your system, putting our families constantly at risk of sickness and disease. And you deemed it acceptable to send a portaloo when you didn't forget or when you could source them. I've had to cancel birthdays, family events. I've had to send my kids away to stay elsewhere because of the health and safety of raw sewage, the contamination. This has been devastating in our lives. I bet you're at your homes being able to use your toilet, bathrooms, kitchens, laundries when it's raining, cold and dark. We can't use any of those things. No washing, no shower, no toilet, no dishes. You get the picture. When it starts raining, that's when I start to stress and worry, thinking, shit, how long or hard is it going to rain? Is it going to happen? I find myself checking my drains, checking the toilet. That tells me whether we can use it. This situation is a mental mindfuck. My anxiety and well-being takes a nosedive. Jason and I start bickering at each other and it's not a fun environment to be in for us or our kids. Why has this been acceptable by council? Why haven't you fought harder for our rights? We have paid you rates for 10 years to completely ignore your obligations, your own legislation, our basic fundamental human rights. As you know, my daughter was toilet trained on a portaloo. You seemed pretty disgusted by this, Gary, but your letter to us recently stated reflux valve as well as portaloos. Again, why has this been an acceptable solution by council? A temporary solution for 10 years has no longer equates to a temporary solution. If you look up the definition of temporary, it's called fixed term, limited time. My son has an anxiety disorder which showed itself to us when we received our first portaloo. He had to use it until he refused to. He would get overwhelmed with anxiety on the thought of using it. He now can't be in confined spaces and he won't use the toilets at school. Those situations can trigger a panic attack. I've had to make a makeshift toilet for him to be comfortable. For his mental health, has been a stressful 10 years for our family to overcome. It's taken its toll, not to mention my daughter and myself have both had UTIs a couple of times while having portaloos and no use of our water. Who is responsible for this? Where does the accountability lie? You, David, who has overseen this since day one, the faceless infrastructure team, no one knows who they are. You know, David, our communication with you back in 2017, you stated, and I quote, portaloos are very much a temporary solution. Communication with James Lee in 2018 states 1 to 2 years. Fast forward to 2023, another 16 months, and as I said, you plan to just keep sending portaloos and lack of a decent clean-up. Gary, you stated in your letter that the work that has been done has successfully reduced the amount of stormwater inflow. We are yet to see and benefit from it. Last year we had a portaloo on our property for about 6 weeks. It was picked up and returned the next day. We then had it for another 2 weeks. It was picked up and returned the next day. We then had it for a further 2 weeks. Also last year, we had sewage pumping out our drains 3 days after it had stopped raining. We couldn't have a clean up, the sun was out and it stunk. The smell was so bad, and there are 10 years worth of these stories to tell. So again, how come the work, you tell me how it has been successful? Or maybe it's because council staff decided to plumb Taranaki Street, including MPS School, on a 225mm pipe into our 150 main, when other communication with council states that you wouldn't do anything to add pressure to our line. How is that not adding pressure to our line? We were already your sewer pond free of charge, wash, rinse, repeat. And even when the work is completed, there is no guarantees that this is even going to work for us. We also have damage on our property. We have untreated raw sewage going straight under our house. I want council to organise having under my house tested and professionally cleaned and my underfloor installation replaced. I'm scared to even think about the damage that has been caused. Our pavers in our drive are uneven, they're sunken and they're moving, and they need to be looked at. I haven't even mentioned the lack of sleep due to the stress. Your mind doesn't shut down. My kids aren't allowed to use the portaloo unless I'm out there with them, especially at night and in the middle of the night. They have to wake me up. I've had nightmares that I wake up and my back door is open and my kids are missing. I wake up upset and in a panic because it just feels so real in the moment. We're at a point where at one point we're asked to share a portaloo with our last neighbours. For it to be put on the grass beside the footpath, council couldn't source enough portaloos, which we refused. I know I've missed a lot. It's hard to think about everything we have endured over the last 10 years. When a lot of it I'd rather forget. The stress, the anxiety, the depression really has affected our family. My kids have seen me in some states, just feeling so hopeless and we can't breathe. Just waiting for the next time. I'm tired, I'm so fucking tired of fighting for our rights to human decency. You would think it would be a given. I'm tired of feeling like a shit mum, putting my kids in this hamster wheel through no fault of my own. It has always been a council issue. The email we received regarding the chambers, I didn't feel anything, to be honest, just numb. As I stated, the damage can't be undone.
Is Tracy now to borrow that?
Jason?
Oh,
Yeah,
Tracy.
Tracy. No, you're right, Jason, you're right.
Yep.
Come
Afternoon, everyone. Jason Childers, registered plumber drain layer for a local Masterton company. You know, as everyone spoke before me, I'm here regarding the inaction of council to live up to and abide by their own codes, regulations and legislation, such as G13, foul water, AS, NZS 3500, Health and Safety 2015, NZBC Regulations 1992, Resource Management Act 91, Wairarapa Consolidated Bylaws 2019 Part 8 Wastewater. So this is a copy of G13, just so you can see I'm not making these words up. These are your words. As a drain layer, we're bound by them. So foul water, objective. The objective of this provision is to safeguard people from illness due to infection or contamination resulting from personal hygiene activities, and safeguard people from loss of amenity due to the presence of unpleasant odours or the accumulation of offensive matter resulting from foul water disposal. Council has failed successfully to uphold and provide service year after year, knowingly that raw sewage from council main has and is still backfeeding onto all of our properties. Our households losing amenities is a direct result. So G13, functional requirement. Inadequate plumbing and draining system to carry foul water to an appropriate outfall. And if no sewer is available, an adequate system for the storage, treatment and disposal of foul water. Council has successfully failed yearly to provide this service, knowing raw sewage from council main is backing up into our properties, covering our yards, driveways, walkways, underneath of our houses, making these areas unusable and left contaminated. G13, performance. The drainage system shall convey foul water to an appropriate outfall, be constructed to avoid likelihood of blockage. Appropriate outfall. This does not mean our backyards, driveways, walkways, anywhere on our properties. Our properties are not an appropriate outfall for council sewer main to end up. At the moment, your not fit for purpose system is using our properties as a venting overflow point. You're breaking every code, regulation, health act and legislation you have that relates to this. You have assessor inspectors that check and verify the work of drain layers that pass or fail drains laid to provide this service. If I was a drain layer that laid a drainage system that has as many faults and fails as badly as the one in Cockburn Street does, that would be reported to the Plumbers Board. I would be fined massively, drainage licence removed and prosecuted fully. I've given council a solution to fix the problem at 141, 143, 145 by means of installing pump chambers at the boundary of these properties with non-return valves in the pump lines to stop the sewage backfeeding up to our properties. Council rejected this as a solution, but have now managed to see the logic in it and accepted it. But have put their own variations on it that we are not entirely happy with. So as to reach a solution, we are happy with wanting a meeting to sit down with those involved in the planning and basically want a scope of works, an as-laid drawing as it's going to be laid, and specs on all work to be done. Council also want an easement to the properties. This is not necessarily, as permission will be given to council or council contractors to access the pump chambers when needed, just as they have now to deliver, pick up, and the portaloos as their non-acceptable solution. Thank you.
Kia ora, Jason, thank you. And we now have Tracy Robins by video.
Hi Tracy, I think you're on mute, Tracy.
Cool. Kia ora whānau. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, fine.
Oh, cool. Oh, well. Kia ora whānau, our Mayor Gary Capel and councillors. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share my victim impact statement with you. When we purchased our property in Cockburn Street, I did not think for 1 minute that I was putting the health and safety of my whānau at risk. I've never been so wrong in my life. I've paid well over $500,000 for the luxury to live in a sewage pond. This sewage seeps into my skin, literally, my mind and my heart now, because my moko is also paying. But he's paying with his health. He's 10 years old and doesn't have any choice in the matter. The smell of raw sewage reverberates under and through our homes. The very odour of sewage sits on the lining of our nostrils. The Masterton District Council and residents of Lower Cockburn Street concur that our 3 properties are at the lowest point of the sewage infrastructure, which means we literally are living in a sewage pond. All of the raw sewage accumulates on and over our 3 properties. Being forced to live in a health hazard, septic tank or sewage pond compelled me to do a little research into household wastewater. I was horrified to find one of the many dangers of this is Campylobacter. Campylobacter is a notifiable disease. My challenge to you, Masterton District Council, is go and find the myriad of diseases that are available to my whānau. They threaten my whānau daily, and all of this is for free. Added to this, the Healthy Homes people refused to go under my house because of the amount of water that was under there. They could not lay the black poly I was asking for. So in 2023, I can't even insulate my house. My piles have concrete around them, but the ground has severely eroded away from the piles due to the increase of water. This info wasn't free. I had to pay someone to tell me this. It is public knowledge that this sewage problem has been ongoing since 2006. The current council admit they've known about it since 2017. Your 2016-17 annual report, it stated, "We are pleased to report a positive financial outcome with an end-of-year surplus of $307,642. While you had a financial surplus, we in Cockburn Street also had a surplus. Sadly, ours was raw sewage, stagnant on our properties, because we live in a sewage pond." Your 17-18 report states, "In accordance with our financial strategy, we ended the year with an accounting surplus of $6.48 million. Not to mention the war here, whānau, but this was the year you'd allocated $15.5 million to your civic centre. While you had a financial surplus, again, so did we in our sewage pond. Your 19-20 annual report says, "We ended the year with an overall surplus of $6.57 million. Meanwhile, we still live in a sewage pond." Your annual report of 2021, in this report, you had an operating surplus of $8.3 million. And just like your increasing surplus each year, we also have an increasing surplus. Only ours is raw sewage in a sewage pond. The fact is, our sewage pond is getting bigger, faster. The problem is worse despite what you have been doing. Surely, Masterton District Council, you are obligated by the Health and Safety Act of 2015. I don't even want to mention the latest long-term plan that's out, where the Cockburn Street residents who are at the lowest point of the sewage infrastructure, I'll say that again, the lowest point of the sewage infrastructure, aren't even mentioned. How dare you? Councillors, whether you have inherited this problem or not, this is your legacy, Masterton District Council. The mental, physical and spiritual well-being of our whānau has been compromised. The pain and suffering has also caused financial and emotional stress. That's evident. The psychological harm that you have inflicted, these facts give rise to a lawsuit. I offer you these facts so that when we come back to you for compensation, you will not have the audacity to fight us on it. Because the facts show a patterned behaviour of criminal negligence. How dare you stand by and witness the detrimental health impacts on our whānau? How dare you put my rates up and not give me a rate refund? How dare you sit in that position of responsibility and not adhere to your own laws? And if you don't live in my house, don't ever tell me you understand, because quite simply you don't. How dare you, Masterton District Council?
I think that's where Tracy finishes. Kia ora, Tracy. Ngā mihi atu ki a koe. Look, it's an emotive issue for the families that live in this community, in these 3 houses specifically. Masterton District Council have known about it since 2006. That was made known to the meeting at Lakeview School by the head of infrastructure, admitted that. It's been a repeated event. Words that David used when we had a video conference, and thank you, David, because there was light compared to what David and Mike got when they turned up. We want to thank you that you've come up with a solution so quickly. However, we need to understand these people have suffered and suffered and suffered, and it's not because they weren't inarticulate. It wasn't because they didn't understand the problem. It wasn't because they didn't offer solutions 6 years ago. Another solution offered from the man who taught himself to be a plumber so he could figure out what was going on. And so he's come with a solution today, and you've offered us a solution in the most recent correspondence. They could not believe their ears or eyes when they saw people outside their driveways measuring things up, thinking, okay, here we go, finally, we have a solution. And we understand that it's incumbent on the council to fix the whole system. When you've got 3 waters coming with the renewal system on your wastewater, your storm water, and every other water in every town. But you are not relieved of your obligation to the individuals when your system fails. And repeatedly, the word that David used the other night, fails. You've got an 11-step system to deliver portaloos to the same houses, because you know it happens. And that was never, should never have been offered as a solution, or those words even used. You didn't fix anything at all. Sewage is still flowing out. It hasn't stopped. And despite the works that have gone on around the streets, and yep, we've had to OIA those so we could find out what they were. And yes, we see that Masterton District Council has undertaken a renewal program and have done some things. But that in and of itself has not changed, has not decreased. We don't need another investigation to figure out whether it has or not. You're still delivering portaloos. The whānau said we refuse to accept portaloos after June the 1st this year ever again. That is not a solution, it never was. It's not a temporary fix, because you haven't fixed anything. In your bylaws, and we pointed it out in the first letter, it says that if there is insufficient gravitational flow to connect these houses to your system, to the system, then individual solutions can be made. We're not even breaking the law. We're not even asking for you to do something extraordinary. You have the provision in your bylaws to do it. You have the obligation in your law to do it. And we've read out, you're the ones tasked to regulate the drain layers to make sure they did it right. You cannot be the regulator and the people tasked to oversee it at the same time when you breach your own codes. And you've breached your code, and you've done it again and again, and you've done it for 10 years. And we do think that's negligent, and when you do it repeatedly like that, that's criminal. Because you're obliged under the law to uphold the individual health and safety of people when your system breaks down. So there's no question that's happened. And Gary, I really do appreciate that you and the councillors who've come in, especially our new ones, with the burn under them to try and get a solution. We appreciate that you've done that. We appreciate that you've got a bigger picture to worry about. And we appreciate that you're willing to take a precedent to solve this. And if that's what you're going to be known for in your legacy, is a precedent to uphold the health and safety of your rate-paying individuals, your residents in this town, then that's a good precedent to set. But actually, we shouldn't be congratulating ourselves over that, because that's actually the law. You actually have regulations to do it and to provide individual solutions when yours fail. So, I believe these guys were promised an agreeable solution. So because now we bought the solution and now we have some sort of adjustments to that solution, what Jason has asked is that we get to sit down with the team, look at the schematics and be agreeable about that. Right? He knows things about, I was going to say shit, but I guess this is a public meeting, I should be careful, that I have no idea about. And so the residents are going to take his advice and his plumbing community's advice, because they've all been talking about it all across town. And I think the council owe these families consultation rights for bringing a solution to the table. You owe these families, you owe these families the opportunity to agree and understand the solution. You owe these families a listening ear, and finally we have it, because they haven't changed their story in 10 years. What's changed on Monday night last week is that people listened. It took some swearing and cajoling and lots of things, but people are listening. I think you owe these families compensation. I absolutely believe that. At least a rates rebate. But we've gone over time and we wanted to give you time to ask questions. But I want to finish with Auntie Addie Paku, who lived in 141. She spent the last 10 years of her life in dementia. I think the compelling story the other night from Bex, who can't be here, Rebecca Waru, who's agreed that we can share the story, is that when her mother didn't recognise what a portaloo was and why she was trying to push her into it, she shit herself. Having to walk through water that is contaminated. They have to disinfect their back step. They have a whole disinfecting regime. They had to disinfect their gumboots. Every time they walk outside, they cannot grow their vegetables in the ground. They grow them on pallets. They don't let their kids play outside. They cannot be assured that they are safe. You wouldn't take a newborn child back to that house. You wouldn't take someone who's just had surgery back to that house. And you wouldn't take your mother who is dying of dementia into that house, but she had to do that. She had no choice. That's her house. You had a choice to address those issues years ago so that she didn't have to block up her back door with wallpaper and pretend it wasn't there so she wouldn't wander outside. Got to leave it there. But we're grateful there is a solution on the table. We'd like the opportunity to move forward and invite any questions.
Thank you very much for what's I'm sure for all of us, a very compelling, emotional and really moving presentation, and thank you for coming to us. We now get to the questions, and I would remind councillors, and I hope you do appreciate the fact that this is emotional, but this is questions only. We don't have major statements here, as you know. This whole situation will come back to the Infrastructure and Services Committee, where we will have a major discussion on it. So I would just ask you to leave what we're doing now to questions, and I'm asking you to, and Councillor Goodwin.
Thank you for speaking. And I suppose my question is, I presume you can understand why central government wants to take the three waters off the councils. Just a question.
Shall I get that one? Thank you. I recognise your question, and it's a hot topic of debate. And here's what I didn't put in here. When Colin Crampton came to talk with everyone about the impeding, Entity C, I asked him, how would you prioritise? You've got the whole region now in Wellington. How was Wairarapa going to get its needs met when you've got the whole of Wellington to consider? How are you going to have a disaggregated, prioritised system so that I know when you come in, Auntie Addie's problem is going to be solved? He said that his prioritisation ranking will be unplanned, untreated overflows first, always, because it's a matter of health and safety. So in regards to the three waters, there's a reason why they're taking it off the councils, and in Auckland, when their infrastructure failed, people died. People are being harmed. Auntie died in that whare because of failure of councils to put the right amount of investment into protecting its health and safety through water infrastructure. So I absolutely understand why central government would do that.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Nelson?
Thank you for sharing your heartbreaking story. You guys are amazing. How did you feel last year when Council had the opportunity to put an entire $3.6 million of better off funding into this very problem, including this immediate solution, and chose not to, and chose to spend $1.4 million on other projects that have nothing to do with this whatsoever? How did you feel?
I watched that meeting, Tim, and I just cried. I was absolutely devastated because they knew, you know what we're going through. You've known about it for years and years and years, and it's like, oh, let's do a water park. My kids can't even play outside in the sprinkler. It's just, it's so frustrating. You just don't understand. Unless you live it and you breathe it, you just don't get it. You don't get it.
Any further question?
Just in response to that as well, the way I feel, and I've only known about it for less than 2 years, is that it's criminal. You've got money expenditure in the annual plan to tack on new wastewater infrastructure into this 1.5 pipe, which is already over capacity, and you agreed and stamped and approved to spend more money to tack more into it when this was still going on. I mean, I think it's criminal, absolutely negligent.